There is a quiet magic in drawers. They are places of rest and secrecy, repositories of things both known and unknown. They close with a soft click and hold inside a small universe of paper, fabric, wood, and memory. In these particular drawers, there were maps, not just any maps, but maps of currents and coasts, maps that spoke of movement and boundary, of places where land meets water, where change is constant yet strangely predictable. Maps have always held a special place in human imagination. They are attempts to order the chaotic, to pin down the unknown, to make sense of the vast world. And these maps, folded and worn, tucked away inside drawers, were more than simple charts. They were living records of journeys, observations, and perhaps hopes. Their paper was creased from use, their edges softened by fingers tracing lines not just with instruments, but with dreams. The currents, the invisible highways of the seas, are ever moving. They twist and turn, ebb and flow, weaving a complex dance beneath the surface. To chart them requires not only skill, but patience, and a deep understanding of the sea's moods. Currents are the veins of the ocean, carrying warmth, nutrients, and life. They connect distant shores and distant times. A map of currents is a map of connection and possibility. The coasts, in contrast, are places of boundary. They mark the end of the land and the beginning of the sea. They are where stories begin and end, where civilizations rose and fell, where dreams of adventure were born. To map a coast is to capture the jagged edges of existence, the places where certainty gives way to the vast unknown. The maps in the drawers were marked not only with dates, but with dreams. This small phrase, marked with dates and dreams, is what gives them their soul. Dates are concrete. They anchor the maps in reality. They tell us when observations were made, when tides were measured, when voyages began or ended. Dates are history written in ink. Dreams, however, are more elusive. They are the invisible ink beneath the surface, the soft traces that cannot be measured or dated. Dreams on a map are not destinations, but aspirations. They are hopes for journeys not yet taken, lands not yet seen, currents not yet followed. They might be sketches of stars to navigate by, notes about places that appear only in memory, or lines drawn toward the horizon beyond which lies possibility. Imagine opening one of these drawers. The scent of salt and old paper rises first, a blend of sea breeze and dust. You lift a map carefully, feeling the texture of thick, slightly brittle paper. The lines of the coast are traced in faded ink, some notes scribbled in the margins, almost like whispers. The names of places long forgotten are written in delicate script. Dates cluster near inlets or bays, marking the ebb and flow of tides or the passing of seasons. Between these dates, faint pencil marks hint at something else. Sketches of ships, small drawings of birds in flight, or waves curling like fingers reaching out. These are the dreams, small, tender things written in secret corners. They are reminders that even the most precise charts belong to human hands, that behind every map is a heart beating with wonder and longing. Drawers holding these maps become more than storage spaces. They become sanctuaries of exploration and memory. Each drawer is a kind of time capsule, preserving the thoughts and hopes of those who made these records. They hold not only the knowledge of currents and coasts, but the emotions bound up in journeys imagined or undertaken. The people who kept these maps were, in a way, dreamers and archivists. They lived between the world as it was and the world as it could be. They marked dates to remember where they had been and dreams to imagine where they might go. Their hands were steady with experience, their eyes sharp with observation, and yet their spirits open to the unknown. These drawers may have been in a cabin by the sea, a study lined with books and instruments, or a weathered ship's captain's quarters. The surroundings whispered of salt air, creaking wood, and quiet nights spent tracing stars. Perhaps a brass compass sat nearby, or a glass bottle filled with sand from distant beaches. The drawers themselves might have been made from driftwood, polished smooth by years of handling, or sturdy oak carved with initials and dates. As the years passed, the maps grew older. The paper yellowed, the ink faded, but the dates and dreams remained intertwined. Some maps were replaced by new ones with updated knowledge and fresh observations. Others were folded and tucked away, waiting for hands to unfold them again, to follow the lines that connected past to present. The maps, marked with dates and dreams, tell a story beyond navigation. They tell a story of hope and curiosity, of the human desire to understand and belong. They speak of the tension between the known and unknown, the fixed and the fluid. The coasts are fixed, land masses etched in stone and sand, but the currents are always moving, shifting in response to unseen forces. This interplay mirrors human experience. We mark our lives with milestones, dates that define beginnings and endings. But within those markers lie our dreams, our hopes, our fears, the unspoken yearnings that give life its texture. The maps in the drawers are like diaries of the sea, chronicling not only geography, but the emotional landscape of those who observed it. One can imagine a person sitting by these drawers late at night, candlelight flickering over the maps spread before them. Their fingers trace the lines carefully, pausing at a particular date or a curve in the coastline. Their mind drifts, caught between memory and anticipation. Perhaps they are planning a voyage or recalling one long past. Perhaps they are simply dreaming, letting the maps guide their imagination to places far beyond the room. In that quiet moment, the maps become bridges, not just across oceans, but across time and feeling. They hold the connection between those who made the maps and those who come after. They invite us to look closely, to see not only the geography, but the human spirit etched within. The drawers, with their maps of currents and coasts, marked with dates and dreams, remind us that even in the most practical of tools, there is room for poetry. That exploration is not only about charting the physical world, but about navigating the inner landscapes of hope and memory. They invite us to open our drawers, to look at our maps of where we have been and where we wish to go, to remember that dates are anchors, but dreams are the sails that carry us forward. Maps are promises, written and drawn with care, binding distant places to known names, fixed lines, and clear divisions. They are guides meant to bring order to the vast, the unknown, and the wild. But when ink fades and borders blur, the certainty a map once gave begins to soften, like a memory slipping at the edges. Ink fades slowly. Not all at once, but in stages. First, the black lines become softer, less bold. The names of places become harder to read, their letters smudged or chipped away by time and touch. The sharp corners of borders grow uneven, wavering like shadows at dusk. The paper itself yellowed and cracked along folds where hands had traced routes over and over, each crease a story, each tear a moment. But what does it mean when the islands themselves begin to move? When the land, drawn so confidently, so carefully, no longer stays where it was placed? Islands are usually thought to be steadfast, solid ground surrounded by water, anchored in place. But over time, even the earth is restless. Currents shift, tides erode, and the sea reshapes the shores. What was once certain becomes uncertain. The island that was on one side of a border drifts ever so slightly, as if reluctant to remain confined by human rules. The shifting of islands is a quiet rebellion, a reminder that nature does not always heed the lines we draw. Borders exist on paper, yes, and in treaties and governments. But the earth breathes and with it moves. It reminds us that permanence is an illusion, that change is the only constant. Ink faded, borders blurred. The map becomes less a tool for certainty and more a relic of hope. hope that we can contain the world in neat packages, that we can know and control what lies beyond our sight. But the blurred borders whisper a different truth. They tell us that the world will not be so easily held, that it spills beyond the lines, that boundaries dissolve as tides rise and fall. And the islands, those small patches of land surrounded by vastness, move slowly over time, a subtle dance with the sea. Their journeys are not dramatic. They do not leap or race. They drift, just enough to change the shape of things, to make what was once familiar feel new and strange. To hold a map with faded ink and blurred borders is to hold time itself, to feel the slow erasure of what we once thought permanent. It asks of us patience, to sit with uncertainty, to learn to navigate without the sharp edges of clear rules. And maybe that is the greatest lesson maps can teach us. Not about geography, but about life. About the gentle, unstoppable movement of change. About how we must sometimes let go of certainty to find our way. Islands move slightly over time, and so do we. Maps, by nature, are tools for navigation. They exist to help us find our way through the unknown, to chart out territories and spaces, to mark landmarks and boundaries. Traditionally, they are updated regularly. New roads are drawn, cities grow and change, rivers shift course, and mountains sometimes erode or are renamed. Cartographers take up their tools to redraw the world to keep pace with life's constant motion. But in this quiet place, those maps remained untouched. They were never updated. And the reason was simple yet profound. There was no need anymore. The maps hung on walls or lay folded carefully on worn tables. Their edges frayed, their ink faded but still legible. Each was a relic, a whisper from an earlier time when the world was still considered a place to be explored and measured. The lines, drawn by meticulous hands, traced the contours of hills, the flow of rivers, the locations of villages, and the paths that connected them. But as years slipped by, those maps did not change. They were not erased or corrected or redrawn. No new ink touched their surfaces. They remained as they had always been. To outsiders, this might seem like neglect or perhaps a failure. How could anyone rely on such maps if they no longer reflected the world around them? But to those who lived with them, the map's permanence was neither accidental nor negligent. It was intentional. The landscape itself had ceased to matter in the way it once did. Why? Because the maps had become something else entirely. They had become symbols. Symbols of a world frozen in memory, of a place held steady in the heart, even as everything else moved. They were less about physical accuracy and more about anchoring identity. The paths that once led to towns now vanished into forest or dust, but the maps still showed them clearly, as though the places still existed somewhere beyond sight. Rivers that had shifted were still drawn in their old courses. Mountains, though eroded, stood tall in ink. This was not a denial of change, but a refusal to let change erase what was meaningful. In that refusal, the maps preserved a kind of permanence that transcended geography. They captured a feeling, a story, and a connection. They spoke of a time when movement was measured, when distances mattered, and when the world was a puzzle to be solved. But now, the puzzle had shifted. The need for navigating the physical had faded, replaced by a navigation of memory, of belonging, of presence. Those who still looked upon the maps didn't do so to plan journeys or mark progress. Instead, they traced their fingers along the inked lines to remember, to reconnect, to find themselves in the past. The maps became mirrors reflecting not just the land, but the lives lived upon it. They held echoes of footsteps, voices, and moments. The edges frayed not just by time, but by hands that lingered. The folds became creased from being unfolded and refolded, carried close in pockets, or spread out on tables for quiet contemplation. In this sense, the maps were updated, not by cartographers with fresh ink, but by the people who kept them alive in their minds and hearts. Every remembered path, Every recalled village was an update made internally. The maps existed in two places at once, on paper, unchanging, and in memory, fluid and alive. There was comfort in this duality. The paper maps didn't demand attention or revision. They were steady, reliable anchors, and the memories that danced around them, sometimes clear, sometimes fragmented, were the living, breathing maps of a world both gone and still present. This was enough. There was no need to chase the changing world beyond those maps. No need to redraw lines that had faded from view. Because the true journey was inward. No one updated the maps because the destination was no longer physical. It was found in the quiet moments of reflection, in stories told at dusk, and in the silent understanding that some places do not change in the way the eye sees, but in the way the heart holds. To update the maps now would be to lose that, to erase the stories, to deny the spaces that could no longer be walked but still lived. The maps were a reminder that permanence is sometimes found not in the world outside, but in the stories we choose to carry. They stood as monuments to continuity in a world where everything else was in flux. And so they remained, unchanged, unaltered, perfectly still, because in this place, that was exactly what was needed. There are moments in our lives that hang in the air, neither begun nor ended, a breath held between intention and action. This is one of those moments. Someone once traced a route with their finger and then didn't follow it. It is a simple gesture, one that could have been done absent-mindedly or with great purpose, yet it leaves behind a quiet echo, a question without an answer. Tracing a route with a finger is a physical way to make sense of possibility. It is the act of mapping potential, of drawing a path through unknowns. The finger moves along a surface, paper, a map, a wall, even the air, connecting dots that might lead somewhere. The route traced is a promise. It is an opening of the world, a way to imagine a journey. Yet in this case, the journey was never taken. The finger's path stopped short of action. The route was never followed. This act, of tracing but not moving forward, contains a kind of tension that is both universal and intimate. We have all experienced moments when we imagine what might be, outline it clearly in our minds or on a page, and then find ourselves unable or unwilling to step into that possibility. The finger's trace becomes a symbol for all the plans we make that remain plans, all the decisions left unmade, and all the dreams held at arm's length. To trace a route is to acknowledge a desire, a hope, or a need to change something, to move from one place to another, to cross some distance, literal or metaphorical. Yet not following the route suggests hesitation, fear, or change of heart. Perhaps the route was too daunting. Perhaps the world beyond that finger's path was uncertain or even frightening. Or maybe the finger traced a familiar route, one that was safe and known, but the heart did not want to move. The reasons could be many, layered and complicated. The physicality of the finger moving along a surface is important. It's a slow, deliberate motion, tactile and grounding. There is an intimacy to it. This is a human hand, not a mechanical tool. The person traced the route with intention, at least for a moment. There was a connection between thought and body, between vision and touch. The route became real in that moment, more than just an idea. It was a possibility sketched out in the world. But then came the choice, or the absence of choice, not to follow. This is where the story deepens, because in every route traced and not taken, there is a story of pause, of silence, of what it means to stand still in the face of so many possible directions. The unchosen path remains behind like a shadow, a memory of what could have been. We might wonder about the person who traced the route. Who were they? What did they hope for? What held them back? Did they feel trapped by circumstance or paralyzed by indecision? Did they turn away from adventure or from the responsibility that comes with movement? Was their tracing an act of longing or of resignation, or something else entirely? There is something both beautiful and sad about this moment. The beauty lies in the simple gesture of imagining a path, in the power of the human mind and hand to chart possibility. The sadness lies in the silence that follows, the stillness that replaces movement, and the absence where there might have been a journey. The surface upon which the route was traced also matters. Was it a crumpled map left on a table? A dusty window? The back of an old book? The ground beneath bare feet? Each possibility adds texture to the story. On a map, the route might be literal, a journey from one town to another. On a window, it could be an imagined journey beyond the frame into the world outside. On the ground, it might be a more immediate desire, a search for direction in place. Tracing a route and not following it leaves behind traces too. The faint line of a fingertip pressed into dust or condensation. The lingering warmth of skin on a cold surface. The faint, invisible imprint of a thought. These traces are subtle, almost imperceptible, yet they speak of presence and possibility. In the days or years that followed, others might come across these traces. Perhaps they will see the faint mark, feel the echo of the gesture, and wonder. Maybe someone else will pick up where the finger left off, willing to follow the path the first person could not. Or maybe the route will remain unfinished, a permanent invitation to consider what it means to wait. There is also a metaphorical richness here. The traced route could represent a life choice, a relationship, a dream, or a moment of transformation. It stands for all the what-ifs that hover around us, those quiet crossroads where decision is difficult and the future uncertain. The finger's trace is a testament to our capacity to imagine change, even when change eludes us. Yet the act of not following is not necessarily failure or defeat. Sometimes it is wisdom. Sometimes it is self-protection. Sometimes it is simply the right choice for the time being. In every untraveled path, there may be hidden reasons, invisible to us, but known to the person who traced and paused. The silence that fills the space between tracing and moving forward is a powerful kind of presence. It is not emptiness, but pregnant possibility. It holds the weight of all choices, made and unmade. It invites reflection, not action. It asks us to consider the meaning of waiting, of hesitation, of the space between desire and fulfillment. We might think of this traced but untraveled route as a threshold, a place where possibility meets pause, a liminal moment, poised on the edge of becoming. It is a quiet reminder that not all journeys begin immediately, that some paths are imagined long before steps are taken. It also reminds us that sometimes the imagining itself is an act of courage. In the end, the story of someone tracing a route with their finger and then not following it is a story of human complexity. It is about the interplay between hope and fear, action and stillness, and desire and restraint. It invites us to sit with the tension, to honor the quiet spaces where plans linger, and to recognize that sometimes the most meaningful journeys start with a traced line, even if the first step is delayed. In the quiet rhythms of a place lived in for so long, certain things become more than objects. They become silent companions, steady presences in the backdrop of life. The lantern, in its unassuming steadiness, was one such companion. Its soft glow wasn't just light. It was a symbol, a signal, a gentle pulse that marked the passage of time and the persistence of routine. It did not demand attention, but it quietly held space, like a heartbeat in the dark. For years, perhaps decades, the lantern had been lit each evening, its warm flame pushing back the shadows, holding the room together when the sun dipped below the horizon. It was never flamboyant or bright. Its light was small and intimate, enough to guide footsteps or warm the edges of tired faces. People passed by it without thinking, but in the unconscious muscle memory of habit, it was always there. The lantern was a reassurance without words, a constant that made a world of small troubles and changing seasons feel steady. Then one day it did not light. The change was not sudden or jarring. There was no dramatic moment of silence or shock. Instead, the room remained gently bathed in the fading daylight of evening. The lantern sat, dark and still, no flame, no flicker, no heat. Yet the people around it continued their routines as if nothing had changed. It was only later, or maybe much later, that anyone realized the absence. Maybe the sun had stayed a little longer that day, or the tasks around the room had kept the mind elsewhere. Maybe the change was so small that it slipped past all noticing, like a leaf falling softly in a forest where silence already lives. There is something profound in how often we fail to notice the subtle changes around us. Those small shifts that do not demand attention, but nevertheless signal deeper transformations. The unlit lantern was one such subtle shift. It was a crack in the fabric of routine, a quiet whisper that the steady rhythm had faltered, even if just for a moment. The absence of light, especially when expected, changes how we feel a space. It invites us into darkness, literally and metaphorically. Light offers safety, clarity, and comfort. Without it, shadows lengthen and corners deepen. The unlit lantern did not shout this darkness. It merely allowed it to seep in gently, unnoticed at first, but present nonetheless. This unnoticed absence speaks to the human tendency to take constants for granted. We trust that certain things will always be there, the morning sun, the ticking clock, the glow of a familiar lamp, and we build our lives around them. When those constants falter, it can take time before the mind registers the loss. We continue as though the world has not shifted, as though the frame around our lives remains solid. In the lantern's unlit state, there was a space for reflection. It was a pause, a moment where the invisible threads holding daily life together loosened. People may have felt a subtle unease, a sense that something was different, but without a clear source. The darkness was not threatening, just unfamiliar. It invited eyes to adjust and minds to notice, but many were too caught in routine to do so. Perhaps someone, at some point, reached out to light the lantern again. Maybe matches were found, a wick adjusted, and a flame coaxed back to life. But maybe the light stayed out for longer than anyone expected. Perhaps the unlit lantern was a sign of larger absences, the slow fading of presence, attention, or care. There is a poetry in that slow fading. It reminds us that light and warmth are gifts, not guarantees. That steady things can fail without warning, and that sometimes the world grows quieter not with clamor, but with gentle letting go. Eventually, when the lantern did not light, someone might have paused to wonder why. Maybe it was a catalyst for small changes, conversations about memory, loss, and presence. Or perhaps it became a symbol, an unspoken acknowledgement that things would not always be as they had been. The lantern's unlit flame invites us to consider how often we live surrounded by lights we never truly see, by constants we assume will never fail. It challenges us to notice the small absences, to attend to quiet changes, and to find meaning in moments when what once was no longer is. In that silence, there is space for memory, for mourning, for acceptance. The unlit lantern is a marker not just of darkness, but of transition. It holds a story of persistence and loss, of the slow, almost imperceptible shifts that shape our lives. And so, no one noticed at first. But in the noticing, there is the beginning of something new, dust. It is one of the most unassuming things in the world, a silent witness to time, change, and stillness. This simple statement invites us to reconsider something we usually overlook or even disdain. Dust is everywhere. It accumulates on surfaces both precious and mundane, creeping quietly into the corners of rooms, resting on bookshelves, covering forgotten objects, and softening the edges of the world around us. It is both everywhere and nowhere, so subtle that it blends into the background of our lives, often ignored and yet impossible to deny. Dust, in its quiet persistence, stands as a silent witness. Unlike the loud events of history, the bright flashes of emotion, or the rapid shifts of our daily lives, dust embodies constancy. It reminds us that even as the world rushes forward, there are elements that remain steady, that continue their quiet work regardless of human intention or awareness. The phrase, "dust did what it always did," carries with it a sense of calm inevitability, a rhythm and a patience that transcends the chaos or silence around it. The gentleness of dust settling is crucial to its character. Dust does not slam into surfaces with violence or urgency. It does not demand our attention or recognition. Instead, it floats through the air carried by invisible currents, soft breezes that move unnoticed, the faintest shifts in temperature or pressure, and then, without ceremony or announcement, it comes to rest. This settling is a delicate, almost graceful process, one of quiet acceptance rather than force. Dust finds its place on windowsills, on forgotten shelves, and in the quiet corners where light rarely reaches. It gathers in thin, delicate layers that soften the sharpness of edges and muffle sound, wrapping the world in a veil of gentle quiet. To say dust settled without asking questions is to highlight its fundamental neutrality. Dust does not judge the surfaces on which it lands. It makes no distinctions between that which is cherished and that which is discarded, between the new and the ancient, or between the clean and the neglected. Dust does not choose sides or carry biases. It simply arrives and stays, patiently marking the passage of time. It neither insists nor interferes. It is content to remain in the background, quietly chronicling the unfolding of days and years. This neutrality allows dust to function as a powerful metaphor for memory and existence. Dust accumulates in places where life once moved actively and vibrantly, but has now paused or slowed. It blankets objects once held or used by hands long gone. It rests on the pages of books that were once eagerly read, and on windows once gazed through in wonder or longing. Dust does not erase these moments or objects. Rather, it softens them, blurring their edges and muting their presence. It whispers histories rather than shouting them. Dust preserves memory not through perfect preservation, but through gentle acceptance of fading, reminding us that time flows inexorably forward and that all things inevitably change shape. The act of dust settling is itself a ritual that requires stillness. Dust cannot settle in spaces that are constantly in motion, filled with noise and commotion. It needs the calm that follows activity, the pause between breaths, the lull after the storm. Dust is patient, waiting for the world to grant it the space it needs. When that moment of stillness arrives, dust takes its place without hesitation. It does not force its way in, but accepts the invitation to settle. This quiet acceptance speaks to a larger lesson about life. Acceptance of the inevitable, the unchangeable, and the things beyond our control. Dust settles without asking why. It does not demand a reason or an explanation for its presence. It simply is. This teaches us about surrender, about embracing the cycles of coming and going, growth and decay. Not everything requires resistance or understanding. Some things simply exist as part of the natural flow. In a room where dust settles gently, there is a profound sense of peace. This peace is not sterile or lifeless, but honors the quiet persistence of time and presence. Dust holds the stories of what was and what remains, embodying history softly rather than shouting it aloud. It offers no demands, no expectations, but extends a gentle companionship, a reminder that we are part of something larger and slower than our immediate concerns. Dust teaches us to notice the beauty in quiet continuity. Imagine a single sunbeam cutting through a dusty room. The air hangs still, and tiny dust particles catch the light like sparks suspended in space. Slowly, inevitably, they begin to descend, tracing invisible arcs as they find their resting place on the floor or a tabletop. This settling is almost hypnotic, a slow dance between presence and absence, between movement and stillness. There is no rush, no drama, only the quiet accumulation of what simply is. Dust settling is also a process of invisibility becoming visible. Though usually unnoticed, dust reveals itself in this soft, gradual arrival. It makes the unseen known, the unnoticed apparent. In revealing surfaces and textures that had blurred, it forces us to look again, not only at what is present, but also at what has quietly come to be. Dust becomes a bridge between past and present, a layer connecting moments without discrimination. There is an inherent irony in dust's seeming insignificance. Though it appears trivial, dust is a force of subtle change. Over time, it alters surfaces, wears down edges, and leaves traces that no cleaning can fully erase. Each grain of dust carries secrets, microscopic histories of air, earth, people, and places. To the patient observer, dust is a map of existence itself, a reminder that even the smallest particles contribute to the grand flow of life and time. Yet, despite its power and presence, dust does not seek recognition. It neither pleads nor protests. It simply exists, as it always has and as it always will. This silent constancy invites us to reflect on our own lives and place within the flow of time. Like dust, we come and go. Like dust, we make an impact, often subtle, sometimes overlooked. And like dust, we have the capacity to settle, gently, without resistance, without the need to understand every moment or outcome. This understanding offers deep comfort. It encourages letting go and embracing quiet persistence. Dust teaches that some of the most profound acts require no fanfare. The act of simply being, of quietly inhabiting space and time, of settling into place, these can be powerful in their humility and grace. In a world that often prizes speed, noise, and spectacle, dust reminds us that value lies also in silence, patience, and presence. It invites us to slow down, to notice what is often invisible, to accept what we cannot change, and to find peace in simply settling. And so dust does what it always does, settles gently, without asking questions. In the modern world, time is one of the most measured and quantified aspects of our existence. We rely heavily on tools and devices, clocks with their ticking hands, calendars segmented into neat boxes, watches strapped firmly to wrists, and digital timers that count every second without mercy. These instruments provide us with a framework, a way to divide the vast continuum of existence into manageable, predictable portions. They give us a sense of control over the intangible, a way to schedule our days, organize our work, and mark the fleeting moments that define our lives. This system of measuring time by mechanical means has become so ingrained that it's difficult to imagine life without it. Yet time itself is an ancient natural phenomenon that has existed long before humans created tools to measure it. The sun rises and sets, seasons come and go, tides ebb and flow. These are rhythms older than any clock, rooted deeply in the fabric of the planet's existence. The passage reminds us of a place where such devices were not necessary, where the waves themselves dictated time. This shift in perspective invites us to explore time not as a rigid construct, but as a living, breathing rhythm. It challenges the assumption that clocks and calendars are the only or best ways to perceive time. Instead, it proposes an intimate connection with nature's cycles, particularly the eternal, soothing pulse of the ocean. Humans have always sought to measure and control their environment. The invention of the clock was a monumental achievement. It allowed societies to coordinate activities, divide labor, and create complex civilizations. Calendars allowed us to plan for agriculture, religious observances, and communal events. Watches turned into symbols of punctuality and personal discipline. Yet, this intense focus on mechanical timekeeping can create a paradoxical sense of urgency and disconnection. The steady tick-tock demands attention. It reminds us of deadlines, appointments, and the pressure to keep moving. We live in an era where time often feels like a commodity to be bought, sold, or wasted. But what happens when we step away from this framework? When time is not divided into artificial increments, but experienced as a natural flow? The passage transports us to a place by the sea where no clocks are necessary because the waves have their own rhythm. This is a profound invitation to consider time as something embedded in the natural world, something to be felt, heard, and lived through rather than controlled or dominated. Imagine living where the hours are not dictated by the chime of a bell or the sweep of a clock's hand, but by the steady arrival and retreat of the ocean's waves. Here, time is cyclical, organic, and deeply intertwined with the environment. This is a different relationship with time, less about conquering it and more about flowing with it. It is a relationship that predates modern technology and exists in harmony with nature's own cycles. The waves embody time's dual nature, repetition and change. Their sound, a soft hush followed by a gathering surge and then a crash, never exactly repeats itself. No two waves are identical, yet their rhythm is constant. This pattern of motion and stillness creates a cadence that invites patience and presence. Unlike clocks that segment time into discrete units, waves mark time in a continuous, fluid manner. They teach us to appreciate the spaces between moments, the pauses and transitions that are often overlooked in our fast-paced lives. The waves remind us that time is not merely something to be measured, but something to be experienced with all our senses. They speak a language that is felt more than understood, one that calls us to slow down, listen, and become attuned to subtle rhythms. For those who live by the ocean, daily life is shaped by the tides. The high tide in the morning signals fishermen to set out, while the low tide reveals hidden treasures such as tidal pools teeming with life or rocks safe to traverse. Meals, work, rest, all these activities follow the sea's natural pulse rather than the clock's demands. This way of life fosters patience and mindfulness. There is no need to rush when the tide dictates the timing. Rather, there is a gentle urging to be ready when the moment arrives and to rest when it passes. The passage suggests that such an existence is less stressful and more attuned to the natural order of things. It teaches us that sometimes the world moves at a pace that cannot and should not be hurried. Unlike the sharp distinctions imposed by mechanical timekeeping, the rhythm of the waves blurs the lines between beginnings and endings. The tide brings the day and carries it away seamlessly, like the breath in and out of a living being. This continuous present moment defies the linear progression that clocks impose. It encourages us to embrace the flow of life, understanding that every ending is a prelude to a new beginning, and every moment contains both the past and the future within it. The ocean's rhythm thus becomes a metaphor for life itself, a cycle of transformation, impermanence, and renewal. The waves can be seen as the first clocks, the original markers of time on Earth, long before humans devised instruments to measure hours, minutes, and seconds. The ocean's tides governed the rhythm of life for coastal communities. Each wave crest and trough tells a story, not just about the water, but about the changing seasons, weather patterns, and even the position of the sun. This natural clock is insistent and gentle, eternal yet ever-changing. The waves remind us that time is embedded in nature, cycles that humanity is a part of rather than apart from. People who live close to the ocean learn to read its subtle signals. Changes in wave patterns can indicate an approaching storm or shifts in weather. The tides bring the richest harvests from the ocean floor at specific times. This attunement requires a deep sensitivity to the environment, a form of knowledge passed down through generations. It fosters a respectful coexistence with nature and a recognition of our dependence on its rhythms. In such a life, the body moves with the waves, not against them. Rest comes when the sea is still. Labor follows the call of the water. This balance creates a sustainable and harmonious existence. Without clocks, time becomes something to feel, not something to count. It becomes a gentle presence, flowing through life rather than a force imposing order on it. The rhythm of waves offers a natural structure that supports spontaneity within routine and flexibility within discipline. It allows for moments to stretch and unfold at their own pace. In the silence between waves, space opens for reflection. Time slows to the speed of sunlight scattering on water or the gentle movement of stones beneath the tide. This experience of time invites a kind of mindfulness, a presence that fully inhabits each moment without rushing to the next. The waves teach us that time is not always to be conquered or controlled. Sometimes it is a song to be joined or a dance to be followed. This perspective requires surrender to forces greater than ourselves, an acceptance of nature's rhythms and cycles. Learning to listen and trust the natural flow of time brings freedom. It frees us from the tyranny of clocks and deadlines and reconnects us to the fundamental rhythms of life. In this place where no clocks are needed, the waves become both guide and companion. They mark the passage of moments with grace, carrying the weight of centuries in their ebb and flow. For those who live by the sea, the rhythm of the waves becomes the rhythm of life itself, steady, soothing, and eternal. This passage invites us to reflect on how we measure and experience time in our own lives. Are we too attached to clocks and schedules that fragment our experience? Do we miss the natural rhythms that surround us, the cycles of day and night, the changing seasons, and the subtle patterns in the wind and water? There is a call here to reclaim a more harmonious relationship with time, one that honors both the natural world and our place within it. Perhaps in moments of quiet, we can listen to the rhythms around us and find our own pace. Perhaps we can learn to live by the rhythm of waves. The passage evokes a profound shift from mechanical, measured time to organic, lived time. It invites us to embrace the ancient, eternal pulse of the ocean as a model for how we might relate to time more fully, with patience, presence, and harmony. In a world dominated by clocks and schedules, this perspective is a gentle reminder that time is ultimately a rhythm to be joined, not a force to be mastered. In the vast sweep of time, everything that exists in the physical world undergoes transformation. Mountains crumble, rivers carve new paths, and even the hardest stones eventually yield to the invisible hands of nature's forces. The passage of time is an artist, wielding wind, rain, frost, and sun as its tools, sculpting, wearing down, and changing the shapes and surfaces of all things. Yet, within this universal process of change, there are nuances that distinguish the ways in which objects respond to time. The phrase, "the tower didn't erode so much as it softened," captures one such subtlety, a difference not merely in degree but in kind. Erosion is often understood as a violent, relentless wearing away. It is the abrasive action of elements gradually gnawing at the surface, stripping away layers until what remains is diminished, broken, or even destroyed. Erosion leaves scars, jagged edges, and ruins. It speaks of loss, of decay, and of the slow march toward disappearance. It is a battle between material and environment, a contest where time ultimately triumphs by taking away. Softening, however, conveys something different. It is a gentler process, less about destruction and more about transformation. It is as if the object, rather than resisting every assault, chooses to yield, to change shape not by breaking but by bending. Softening implies a surrender that retains essence, that reshapes, but does not obliterate. It is the world's quiet kindness. The stone's sharp angles mellow into curves, the harsh textures mellow into smoothness, and the rigid structure relaxes into a form more approachable, more humane. The tower in question embodies this distinction perfectly. It has survived centuries of weather and time, but it has not been worn into ruin. It has softened. This softening is a kind of survival, a testament to endurance through grace, rather than force. From afar, the tower stands tall and dignified, much as it always did. It is still a landmark, still reaches toward the sky, and still asserts its place in the landscape. But up close, the story changes. Its once hard edges have become gentle curves. The cold, rigid walls now seem warm and inviting, textured like aged parchment or leather rather than cold stone. The mortar that once held the stones tight now allows spaces that breathe. This physical softening mirrors a conceptual one. The tower is no longer an intimidating fortress or an impassive monument. It is something softer, more familiar, and more alive in its presence. It is like an old friend whose wrinkles and lines speak of lived experience and quiet wisdom, not damage or decay. The tower's surface, now covered in moss and lichen, is no longer an impenetrable barrier, but a living part of the environment. Nature has embraced it, weaving it into the ecosystem rather than allowing it to remain isolated. The vines climbing its walls and the birds nesting in its nooks speak of a gentle integration with the world around it. This transformation from hardness to softness resonates deeply with human life. Often people fear the marks left by time, wrinkles, scars, fading memories. We resist aging and change, striving to maintain sharpness, strength, and clarity. Yet the process of softening offers a different perspective. That true strength lies in acceptance, in yielding gracefully, in allowing oneself to change shape in response to life's winds without fracturing. Just as the tower's stones have mellowed, revealing layers beneath the surface, people who soften through experience develop depth and richness. Their edges become less sharp, their connections more tender. They carry stories in their lines and wrinkles, reflecting moments of joy and sorrow, resilience and surrender. The tower's softening invites reflection on how endurance might be redefined. Instead of clinging rigidly to a fixed form or identity, endurance might mean embracing change, adapting gently, and preserving essence rather than outward appearance. Beyond its physical form, the tower holds memories, echoes of all who lived in its shadow, watched sunsets from its windows, and left their voices behind in its halls. Each softened stone whispers stories of time past, of lives touched, of moments shared. The tower is a repository not just of stone, but of human presence. Touching the tower is to connect with its history, not cold and unyielding, but warm and welcoming. Its texture feels like aged leather or the bark of an ancient tree, carrying the passage of time in a way that invites rather than intimidates. Visitors who come seeking the tower often find themselves changed by its presence. The imposing grandeur that might have once caused awe or fear now invites quiet contemplation. Leaning against its softened walls, people feel a moment of stillness, a kind of peace that transcends the physical. They sense that what has been preserved is not just a building, but a state of being. The tower's softening reflects its growing relationship with nature. The harsh human-made lines have surrendered to natural growth. Vines braid through cracks, moss cushions stone surfaces, and birds find shelter. The tower no longer stands apart as an artifact of human endeavor. It belongs to the land and sky, to the wind and rain. This integration symbolizes endurance through adaptation. Just as rivers carve landscapes not by force, but by persistence, and mountains wear down through countless small breaths of wind and water, the tower too endures by becoming part of the larger flow of life. There is an echo here of a larger truth. Survival is often not about fighting change, but about flowing with it, allowing the self to become part of a wider, living whole. Softening bestows a new kind of beauty, one that speaks of vulnerability as strength, of yielding as a form of resilience, and of aging as grace. This beauty is subtle and often overlooked in a world obsessed with youth, sharp lines, and unyielding strength. The softened tower teaches that transformation does not have to mean loss. The mellowed stones and rounded edges are not signs of defeat, but marks of a journey well traveled. They celebrate a form of living that honors time rather than denying it. From the softened tower, we can learn profound lessons about how to live with time. Passage. Endurance is not resisting change at all costs. True strength sometimes lies in acceptance and adaptation. Time shapes us not by breaking us, but by revealing deeper layers of who we are. Vulnerability and softness can be sources of power and beauty, and integration with the natural world and with change itself is a form of survival. In these lessons, the tower stands as a quiet teacher, offering wisdom through its softened stones. Despite centuries of storms, neglect, and the relentless passing of time, the tower remains, not as a ruin, not as a relic, but as a softened, welcoming presence. It has transformed from a symbol of rigid strength into one of graceful endurance. It invites all who approach to reconsider their own relationship with time, change, and survival. The tower teaches us that to stand is not always to resist. Sometimes it is to soften, to yield, and yet remain. Softened, standing, welcoming. In the gentle rhythm of the world, there are moments when presence is fleeting, a brief pause amid constant movement. The birds landing, staying just long enough to rest, and then taking flight again, embody this transient quality of existence. Their brief stay is not rooted in permanence or ownership, but in the natural flow of their journey, a necessary pause before the next destination. Life moves in rhythms, some slow and deliberate, others fast and fleeting. Nature itself is a symphony of movement. Rivers flow, clouds drift, leaves fall and scatter. Within this ever-moving world, moments of stillness are precious but rare. The image of birds landing briefly captures this balance perfectly. They are not static fixtures, but travelers passing through the vastness of time and space. Their temporary presence is like a breath held in the midst of a long exhale, necessary, restorative, yet always destined to end. Birds symbolize freedom and motion. Their ability to take wing and cross boundaries without limitation makes them one of the purest emblems of transience. Yet, even they require moments to pause, to rest their wings and gather strength for the journey ahead. This pause is not a sign of weakness or indecision, but an essential part of their survival and progress. It is a rhythm repeated daily and seasonally across the world's skies. In their brief stops, birds remind us that life is not merely about destinations, but about the pauses that give us the strength to continue. Like a traveler stopping briefly at a roadside inn, the rest is not the journey's end, but a vital interlude. This cyclical rhythm of movement and pause is fundamental to existence itself. Birds, by nature, are travelers. Their lives are woven through migrations, explorations, and daily searches for sustenance and shelter. They do not claim a place as home for long, but instead touch down briefly, absorbing what they need before moving onward. This behavior mirrors a larger truth about life. Many moments are temporary, and staying too long in one place can mean missing the broader journey. Migration is one of the most awe-inspiring natural phenomena. Birds embark on epic journeys spanning thousands of miles, crossing oceans, mountains, deserts, and cities. These journeys connect continents and ecosystems, knitting together the web of life. Their transient stops along the way, sometimes lasting only hours, are vital nodes in these vast networks. But beyond biology, this pattern reflects a profound truth about life and human experience. We, too, are travelers on our paths. Our lives unfold through stages and transitions, through relationships and places, through periods of growth and rest. Staying rooted in one spot for too long can create comfort, but may also limit perspective and growth. The brief landings of birds teach us that it is okay to move on, to let go of the familiar, and to seek new horizons. Their behavior suggests a wisdom in impermanence, a recognition that life's richness comes not from clinging to one place, but from embracing movement and change. This does not mean rushing through life or neglecting deep connections. Instead, it points to the importance of balance, knowing when to rest, when to explore, and when to continue forward. The bird's flights embody this balance in a pure, instinctive form. The phrase, "even they had other places to be," reminds us that rest and stillness, while important, are often fleeting. Even creatures so small and seemingly carefree must move on, driven by instinct or purpose. This speaks to a universal condition, the push and pull between staying and leaving, between rest and progress, between being grounded and being free. Even they had other places to be. These words carry a quiet weight. They imply that even the smallest, lightest creatures are bound by purpose and necessity. The birds cannot linger indefinitely. Their survival depends on their ability to move on, to follow internal calls, whether seasonal migrations or daily needs. For humans, this sentiment resonates deeply. We face similar tensions in our lives: the desire to stay rooted versus the call to explore, the comfort of stability versus the allure of change, the safety of routine versus the challenge of growth. Rest is vital, but it is often temporary. Progress requires movement. Freedom means having the courage to leave what is known. The bird's departure reminds us that life is a continuous balancing act, a dance between opposing forces. This universal push and pull shape the human condition. We are wired for belonging and connection, yet we also crave independence and discovery. The tension between these desires creates the texture of our lives. Recognizing that even birds must leave helps us accept that sometimes we too must move on, not out of dissatisfaction but out of alignment with life's natural rhythms. There's a gentle melancholy in their departure, a recognition that no place can hold us forever. Yet there's also a quiet grace in their movement, a reminder that life is a series of moments strung together by transitions. Each landing is a moment of pause, each takeoff a renewal of purpose. The departure of birds is never abrupt or violent. It is a graceful lifting off, a soft unfolding of wings, a final glance backward before soaring forward. This movement carries with it a bittersweet quality. It acknowledges that places, no matter how welcoming, cannot contain us indefinitely. Everything is temporary. This melancholic beauty resonates with human experience. We form attachments to people, places, and moments. Saying goodbye is often hard, yet departures are necessary for growth. They open space for new experiences and perspectives. The image of birds landing and taking flight captures the essence of transition. Life is made up of such passages, between chapters, roles, and phases. Each pause offers time to gather strength, reflect, and recalibrate. Each takeoff is an act of courage and intention. Understanding this cyclical nature helps us approach change with more compassion and acceptance. Instead of fearing loss or clinging to permanence, we learn to see life as a river flowing through different landscapes, ever moving, ever renewing. In this way, the bird's brief visit is a metaphor for our own experiences. We arrive in places and relationships, stay for a time, and then move on, shaped by what we encountered but never held back. Like the birds, we too have other places to be, other skies to fly, other horizons to chase. Metaphor is a powerful tool for meaning-making. The simple image of birds landing and leaving unfolds into a rich symbol for human journeying. We all enter lives and spaces that shape us, that nurture us, but we are rarely meant to remain forever. Our growth often depends on embracing impermanence. Relationships, careers, homes, and identities are not fixed points, but parts of a broader unfolding. Each interaction adds texture to our story without fully defining it. We carry pieces with us even after departure. This metaphor also speaks to the freedom inherent in movement. To have other places to be suggests purpose and possibility. It implies that life is expansive, that there is more beyond each moment. Embracing this outlook can ease the pain of parting. It invites us to celebrate the journeys rather than mourn the endings. This line invites reflection on impermanence, the nature of belonging, and the flow of life itself. It honors the brief pauses that sustain us, while acknowledging the onward call of life's journey. Impermanence is one of the fundamental truths of existence. Nothing remains unchanged, and nothing lasts forever. Yet, rather than being cause for despair, this reality offers liberation. When we understand that all things are transient, we become more present, more appreciative of each moment's unique value. Belonging to takes on new meaning in this light. It is not about possession or permanence, but about connection, sometimes brief, sometimes deep, always meaningful. Belonging is less about holding on and more about meeting fully, even if only temporarily. The flow of life is not linear, but cyclical, fluid, and dynamic. It is made up of moments of stillness and movement, arrival and departure, connection and release. The image of birds landing and flying away encapsulates this dance perfectly. In honoring the brief pauses, the rest, the presence, the breath, we cultivate resilience and grace. We learn to move with life rather than against it. And in acknowledging the onward call, the departure, the unfolding horizon, we find courage and hope. Together, these dynamics create a harmonious rhythm that sustains us through change and uncertainty. At the heart of our existence lies something so fundamental, so ever-present, that we rarely give it thought: the air around us. The passage begins with the idea that there is a kind of air that wraps around us so seamlessly that we forget it is there. This notion captures a profound truth about human perception and the nature of presence itself. The air, the very medium through which life's breath flows, is often the quietest companion of our days, unnoticed precisely because it never demands our attention. It neither burns with the harshness of a winter's cold, nor clings with the oppressive weight of summer's humidity. It simply is. This air is the breath of ordinary existence, the silent frame upon which the vivid pictures of life unfold. It is the invisible thread that stitches together every step, thought, and pause. Without it, no story could be told. Without it, no moment could be lived. The air described is the fabric of daily life, so constant that it slips beneath consciousness. This constancy means it operates as a background hum, a quiet presence that fills every corner without clamoring for recognition. Unlike the dramatic weather changes or vivid scents that command our attention, this air is neither fragrant nor foul, neither warm nor cold. It is neutral, almost a non-entity, yet it is essential. It fills our lungs with every breath we take, and yet it does so with no fanfare, no announcement. It flows in and out like a steady tide, seamless and reliable. The passage suggests that to notice this air, to truly become aware of it, is to risk breaking the flow of thought. We live so often inside our minds within a steady current of plans, worries, joys, and routines that to become aware of the air is to become momentarily detached from these narratives. Awareness of this fundamental presence pulls us out of automaticity into the realm of mindfulness. For most moments, then, the air remains unnoticed. It is a gentle, silent stream that carries life forward. This metaphor beautifully captures the paradox of the air. It is both invisible and indispensable, silent and sustaining. In the place where this air lingers, there is no rush, no gusts of wind to disturb the calm, no humidity pressing down heavily, no sense sharp enough to alert the senses. Just the subtle, steady presence of air, moving softly, embracing all that was happening without judgment or expectation. This calmness can be seen as a metaphor for certain moments in life and spaces in which things simply exist in a state of peaceful equilibrium. The air's constancy provides a kind of comfort, a reliable background against which everything else with its variability and drama can take place. It is the slow, steady breath of the room, the slow exhale of time passing quietly. It contains the warmth of familiar gatherings and the chill of empty spaces. It is both witness and participant, encompassing all the comings and goings of existence. Such constancy in the background often goes unappreciated. Yet it is vital. Without it, the highs and lows of experience would be disjointed, unmoored from a sustaining core. Breathing this air is an unconscious act, woven into the very rhythm of living. The passage underscores its indispensability. Its absence would be immediately felt, a gasp in the chest, a choking silence. This reminds us that while we rarely attend to breathing, it is the essential process that makes life possible. In its ongoing sameness, the air offers a canvas for experience. This image helps us realize that the air is like the blank space in a painting, the foundation on which the colors, shapes, and stories are laid. It does not overshadow but supports. Yet beneath the apparent sameness, the air is never truly still. It carries the faintest movements, the flutter of curtains, the soft shift of dust, the warmth of a nearby body. This invites the reader to consider that even what seems unchanging is vibrant with subtle life. The air's subtle dance of molecules touches everything and nothing all at once. This phrase evokes the paradox of presence and absence. The air is everywhere and nowhere. It is tangible because it is physical, yet elusive because it is invisible and intangible to our direct perception. The idea that such air might only be noticed in a rare stillness, when the world hushes enough for the quiet to become audible, invites mindfulness. It suggests that to become aware of the air, we must slow down and listen with all our senses, tuning in to the quiet rhythm that underlies louder, more obvious stimuli. The passage continues by highlighting a meditative quality in breathing unnoticed air. It invites us to settle, to pause the endless quest for meaning in every sensation, and to exist simply, connected to the most basic of gifts, breath. This offers a spiritual dimension, the idea that presence does not need to be grand or overwhelming. Sometimes presence is quiet, even whispered. The unnoticed air teaches us that not all profound moments come with drama. Many come in the spaces between thought and action, in the gentle embrace of what simply is. This is a lesson in acceptance, in finding peace in stillness, and in appreciating the subtle textures of life that do not shout but sustain. In this air, memories float softly like feathers. This beautiful metaphor suggests that the air itself holds the imprint of time, carrying echoes of the past gently and imperceptibly. The passage imagines the air as a witness to voices that have come and gone, laughter that once filled the space, and silence that now lingers. It holds the echo of footsteps, the shadow of a touch, and the warmth of a smile. These are traces of human experience embedded invisibly in the very fabric of the environment. This portrays air not just as a physical necessity, but as a vessel for memory and presence. It becomes a silent guardian of stories that are no longer spoken, but still live on in subtle ways. To breathe this air is to be part of a continuum. This line reminds us that our individual existence is connected to all who have come before and those who will come after. Breath is portrayed as a shared experience that links us intimately to place and moment. The air is not simply around us, it is part of us, as essential as the blood in our veins. This reminds us of the deep interconnection between humans and their environment. We are not separate from the air we breathe. We are woven into its flow. The air moves without hurry, without insistence. This quality teaches patience. Not every change is dramatic or loud. Many unfold quietly in the steady rhythm of inhalation and exhalation. This is a meditation on time itself. Life progresses gently, carrying us forward without notice. The air embodies a peaceful persistence, a reminder that even when change is imperceptible, it is real. Finally, the air stayed the same. It is described as unremarkable, steady, constant, the kind you breathe without noticing. This steady companion exists alongside absence and presence, beginnings and endings, and movement and stillness. It held space for all things, both known and unknown, spoken and silent. It was the unnoticed breath of existence, carrying life gently through the days. This passage invites us into a profound meditation on presence, perception, and the foundational elements of life often overlooked. The air we breathe, while unnoticed, is a vital living force, holding memory, shaping experience, and connecting us to a larger continuum. It teaches us about constancy and change, about the quiet rhythm that underlies all existence. It asks us to slow down, to notice the invisible, and to find peace in the simple, steady breath of ordinary life. In embracing the unnoticed air, we are reminded that life's most essential gifts often come wrapped in silence and subtlety. We are part of this air. It is part of us. And through it, the story of presence, memory, and existence flows quietly onward. There was no ceremony, no closure. The watching simply stopped. In those few words lies an entire world of unspoken grief, quiet endings, and the cruel finality that life often delivers without fanfare. To understand the weight of this statement, one must first unpack its simplicity. It speaks to an ending, not a grand finale, not a carefully orchestrated conclusion, but an abrupt cessation. There was no ritual to mark the moment, no acknowledgement of its significance, and no symbolic act to help those left behind process what had occurred. There was only the end, raw and unadorned. The line draws its power from understatement. It refuses melodrama, choosing instead to capture the stark reality that most endings in life arrive without warning, without justice, and without the dignity we wish them to have. Closure is a concept humans cling to for survival, a way to make sense of loss, but in many cases, closure is a myth. This sentence tears away that illusion and forces us to confront the fact that often there is no sense to be made, no parting words, and no final bow. Things simply stop. What does it mean that the watching simply stopped? This choice of words, watching, suggests an ongoing act, perhaps one of quiet care, observation, or companionship. Someone was witnessing, guarding, or perhaps even just existing alongside another being or event. Watching is active, but it is also passive. It is a form of presence, a way of affirming that someone or something matters enough to be observed. When it stops, it implies absence. Either the watcher has gone, or that which was being watched has disappeared, changed, or ceased to be. This makes the phrase deeply haunting because it evokes the abruptness of endings. There is no drawn-out farewell, no opportunity to prepare for the void left behind. The watching just ends. It doesn't dwindle or fade. It halts, leaving an echo of what once was. In this way, the sentence embodies the way people experience many profound losses in life. A conversation left mid-sentence by death, a friendship cut off by distance or betrayal, a dream abandoned not with resolve, but with quiet resignation. There was no grand decision, no dramatic confrontation, just a stop, a quiet void. This line also speaks to the human need for rituals. Ceremonies are designed to give shape to endings. Funerals, graduations, goodbyes, all exist to create a bridge between what was and what is. They are markers that give us permission to grieve, to celebrate, and to move on. Without them, people are left unmoored. There was no ceremony, no closure suggests a deprivation of that structure. It is an acknowledgement of the ache that comes from endings that are unmarked and unresolved. When someone dies without a goodbye, when a relationship ends in silence, when a chapter of life closes without acknowledgement, it leaves a wound that lingers. That wound festers because there is no language, no ritual, and no shared space to process what has been lost. It remains private, raw, and unresolved. Thus, the pain becomes cyclical. The mind replays the ending, searching for meaning, searching for something that will never come. Philosophically, this line can be read as a meditation on impermanence. Life rarely offers clean arcs or well-crafted narratives. The stories we tell ourselves, in books, films, or even casual conversation, often impose order where there is none. We edit life into neat beginnings, middles, and ends. But in truth, many things conclude in fragments, cut short before they reach the tidy resolution we expect. A person we see every day suddenly vanishes from our life with no explanation. A habit or passion we've nurtured for years disappears without a moment of decision. Sometimes even our identity shifts in ways we can define. We simply wake up one day and realize we are no longer who we were, but we don't remember when that change happened. This line captures that unceremonious nature of real endings. The watching simply stopped means that there wasn't even a conscious choice. It happened on its own, and all that is left for those involved is to accept it. On an emotional level, this line is devastating because of its stillness. There is no outburst, no dramatic moment, only silence. And silence is often the hardest thing to endure. The quiet stopping of watching implies not only the end of observation, but the end of connection. It reflects the loneliness that follows when the bond, whether between two people, between a person and a routine, or even between a person and their own purpose, is severed without acknowledgement. It leaves the observer, or the one who was observed, in a liminal state, unsure of how to feel, unsure of how to move forward. The lack of closure robs them of the ability to understand the narrative. Was it their fault? Was it inevitable? Was there something left unsaid? They will never know. And that is the most excruciating part of endings without ceremony. They trap you in a loop of unanswered questions. The phrase also carries a quiet dignity. There is no spectacle, no desperate attempt to claw at meaning. In its brevity, it mirrors the way grief and loss can sometimes feel too large for words. There's a maturity in the acknowledgement that some things just end. This doesn't mean the pain is less. If anything, it's more profound because it refuses to be dressed up in platitudes or false hope. It invites the reader to sit with the rawness of incompletion. In our world, where every experience is increasingly documented, broadcasted, and shared, there is something profoundly unsettling and perhaps strangely honest about an ending that passes without witnesses, without ritual, without anything to signify that it mattered. But this honesty has its own kind of poetry. It reminds us that not every story needs to be tied up. Not every goodbye will be spoken. Not every watchful presence will have a memorial when it ends. From a psychological perspective, this line reflects the disorientation that comes when closure is denied. Humans are storytelling creatures. Our minds crave narratives with beginnings and ends because they help us contextualize experiences. When we cannot frame an ending, when the watching simply stopped, it can feel like an unfinished sentence echoing endlessly in our heads. It creates what psychologists call ambiguous loss. This is the kind of grief we feel when someone is gone but not officially lost, like a missing person, a friend who ghosts us, or even our younger selves, whom we can no longer find. It is grief without resolution, mourning without a grave to visit. And because there is no ceremony, there's also no communal acknowledgement of the pain. It becomes solitary, silent suffering. Those who experience it may feel isolated, like their pain is invisible because the world didn't stop to recognize what they've lost. Yet, there is also a universal truth in this line that makes it resonate so deeply. Everyone, at some point, has experienced an ending like this. Whether it's the sudden end of a relationship, the quiet fading of a once vital dream, or even the final breath of someone who left before you could say goodbye. We all know the ache of incompletion. This line is a mirror, showing us that our desire for ritual and closure is often unmet. Life does not pause to give us time to process. It keeps moving, indifferent to our pain. But in acknowledging this, the line offers a strange comfort. You are not alone in this feeling. This is what it means to be human. There is another layer of interpretation, the idea that watching could refer to something much larger than interpersonal relationships. It could be about the end of faith, the loss of a worldview, or the collapse of a long-held belief. Watching, in this sense, could represent a way of being, a posture toward life, one of attentiveness, engagement, or hope. When that posture stops, it signals a profound internal shift. Perhaps it is the moment when someone loses trust in the world, when they stop paying attention because watching hurts too much. It could be the psychological shutting down that follows trauma, a survival mechanism that numbs a person when they can no longer handle the weight of witnessing their own life. This interpretation makes the line even more devastating, as it speaks to the quiet death of parts of ourselves that go unacknowledged. Ultimately, there was no ceremony, no closure. The watching simply stopped is not just a sentence about an ending. It's a statement about the human condition. It is about how life often unfolds without neat resolutions, and how we are forced to sit with unfinished stories and unspoken goodbyes. It is about the quiet tragedies that don't make it into the headlines, the private losses that leave us staring at the walls, wondering how to go on. It's about the loneliness of grieving something that ended without acknowledgement, and the quiet resilience it takes to keep living in the absence of answers. The lack of ceremony and closure does not make the ending less real. It makes it more haunting. And yet, in putting this experience into words, the line itself becomes a small kind of ceremony. It acknowledges what was lost, even if no one else did. It witnesses the unwitnessed. In the end, the power of this line lies in its refusal to explain itself. It doesn't tell us who was watching or what ended, or why there was no ceremony. It leaves space for us to project our own losses into it, to find our own meaning, and perhaps that is its gift. It gives language to the moments in life when things just stop, quietly, unceremoniously, and reminds us that even without closure, even without ritual, those endings matter. They shape us, they stay with us, and they deserve to be remembered even if only in the silence that follows. The line, "The sea didn't care. It kept moving as it always had," is a deceptively simple statement that carries immense philosophical, emotional, and literary weight. At first glance, it may appear as a straightforward description of nature's constancy. The sea, vast and indifferent, continues its motions regardless of human concerns. But when unpacked deeply, it reveals layers of meaning about human existence, grief, resilience, and the relationship between people and forces greater than themselves. It is far more than a casual observation of nature. It is a mirror for life itself, reflecting truths about the universe's neutrality and humanity's search for meaning. The sea has long been one of the most enduring symbols in literature, myth, and human imagination. It is both a source of life and a representation of the unknown. It has been feared and revered by sailors, worshipped by ancient cultures, and contemplated by philosophers and poets for centuries. The phrase, "the sea didn't care," captures one of the most profound truths about it. The sea is beyond morality, beyond human notions of fairness or justice. It exists in its own state of being. Whether wars rage on land, people grieve, or civilizations collapse, the sea continues to rise and fall, its waves following ancient rhythms set by forces far beyond human control. The second part of the sentence, "it kept moving, as it always had," reinforces this timelessness. The sea does not pause for grief. It does not celebrate joy. It does not acknowledge individual struggles or victories. It simply continues its eternal cycle. In this sense, the sea becomes a metaphor for the continuity of existence, the passage of time, and the way nature endures even as human lives flicker like brief candles along its shore. On an emotional level, the statement can feel almost cruel. When someone is experiencing pain, the idea that the sea didn't care can sting. There is a profound human desire for the universe to respond to our suffering, for nature to reflect our inner states, for storms to rise when we are angry, for rain to fall when we are heartbroken, for sunsets to blaze when we are joyous. But this is a human projection. The sea does not rise in rage because a person is angry, nor does it still itself to comfort the grieving. It moves because that is its nature. This indifference can be painful to confront. It emphasizes the smallness of the individual in the face of something vast and impersonal. The grieving mother who sits by the shore after losing her child may feel insulted by the way the waves still sparkle in the sunlight, as though nothing has happened. The widower walking along the beach may wonder how the tide can still pull in and out when his world has collapsed. This disconnect between human emotion and natural continuity is central to the bittersweet ache of the line. Philosophically, the line aligns with existentialist and absurdist thought. Thinkers like Albert Camus and Jean-Paul Sartre explored the idea that the universe is indifferent to human existence. Camus, in particular, suggested that the absurd arises from the clash between humanity's search for meaning and the universe's silence. The sea in this sentence embodies that silence. It does not care about individual lives. It does not answer prayers or acknowledge loss. It moves always, as it has for millennia. Yet in this indifference lies a strange kind of truth. The sea's lack of care can be interpreted not as hostility, but as neutrality. It is not against us, it simply is. It moves because that is what it does. It has been moving before us and will continue long after we are gone. This can be terrifying to some, liberating to others. In a way, it relieves us of the illusion that the world owes us anything or that it will stop for us. It encourages us to face existence on its own terms, rather than expecting the universe to adapt to our emotional needs. Interestingly, the same words that bring a sense of cold indifference can also bring comfort. It kept moving, as it always had, can remind us that no matter what happens, life continues. The sea's rhythm is reliable. In a world that can feel unstable and chaotic, the knowledge that some things remain constant can ground us. For a grieving person, knowing that the waves still crash and the tides still flow can be a quiet reassurance that existence is ongoing, that the world has not ended even if their personal world feels shattered. This is why the sea often becomes a place of solace for those in mourning or in crisis. It provides a backdrop that is unchanged, a reminder of continuity. While individual human stories may feel earth-shattering, the sea places them in the context of something much bigger. This shift in perspective can be humbling, but also healing. The line also emphasizes the stark difference between human life and natural cycles. Humans live in a narrative mode. We see beginnings, middles, and ends. We want closure and purpose. Nature does not. The sea does not mourn the shipwrecked or celebrate the saved. It has no narrative, only process. Its currents flow regardless of human presence. Its tides are dictated by the moon, not by the joys or sorrows of those who stand on its shores. This contrast forces us to confront a question. How do we live meaningfully in a world that does not conform to our emotional logic? The sea teaches us that the search for meaning is ours alone. Nature will not provide it. Instead, we must create it for ourselves. In this way, the line becomes an invitation to embrace agency, to find meaning even in the face of indifference. There is also an implied historical dimension to the line. When we say, as it always had, we are invoking the idea that the sea has been moving for millions of years, long before our individual or collective stories began. Empires have risen and fallen on its shores. Wars have been fought over its trade routes. Myths have been told about its monsters and gods. And yet, through it all, the sea has remained in motion, unchanged in its essence. It is a living archive of time, a witness to all that has come before. When someone stands at the edge of the sea, they are standing at the border of history and eternity. The same waves that lap at their feet once touched the feet of ancient people who no longer exist. This can make human troubles seem small, but it can also connect us to a larger continuity. In a sense, the sea keeps our stories, even if it does not care about them. On a personal level, the line often speaks to moments of grief. It describes the surreal experience of losing someone or something deeply important and then noticing that the world hasn't changed. How can the sea still move when life has stopped for me? This question echoes in the hearts of those who feel abandoned by the universe in their pain. Yet, over time, this very indifference can become a source of resilience. The realization that the sea kept moving is also a reminder that we can too. Life does not stop for grief, but neither does it stop for joy. Like the sea, we can keep moving. Not because we do not care, but because movement is what allows healing. This is one of the paradoxical lessons of nature. To survive, we must flow as it does. Ultimately, the sentence, "the sea didn't care. It kept moving, as it always had," is a reflection on existence itself. It speaks to the eternal tension between human fragility and the unchanging rhythms of the natural world. It reminds us that the universe is not a character in our personal stories. It does not bend to our will or mirror our emotions. It simply continues. And yet, within this realization lies an opportunity. If the sea can keep moving, so can we. If the sea can persist through centuries of storms and calm, so can we weather our own tempests. The line is not just a statement of indifference, it is an invitation to resilience. It tells us, the sea moves. You can too. No one came to take the tower down. Why would they? The sentence stands there like the tower itself, stark, immovable, unadorned, yet carrying the weight of years and the silence of countless unspoken thoughts. No one came to take the tower down. It is a statement of fact, but it also implies a question. Why did the tower stand so long? Why did no one act? And then, as if to preempt the listener, the next line responds with bitter clarity. Why would they? This is more than an explanation. It is an indictment. It speaks to human complacency, to the strange inertia that grips communities when a structure, be it physical, emotional, or symbolic, has stood long enough that it becomes part of the landscape. But what is this tower? On the surface, it may be literal, a watchtower, a bell tower, or some monument from another era left to loom over a village, a field, or an abandoned city. But in the realm of interpretation, a tower is rarely just a tower. Towers have long been symbols of power, isolation, vigilance, and arrogance. From the biblical Tower of Babel to the prison towers of modern states, from Rapunzel's lonely spire to the crumbling towers of ancient castles. A tower can be a relic of ambition, a scar of conquest, or a testament to human refusal to let go of the past. To say that no one came to take the tower down is to acknowledge that this structure with all its layered meanings persisted not because it had to, but because no one dared or cared enough to challenge it. And that second sentence, why would they, lands like a stone. It isn't posed as an open inquiry. It's rhetorical, sharp with resignation. It suggests that the tower's existence was so normalized, so ingrained in the fabric of its world, that the idea of dismantling it seemed absurd. Or perhaps it implies that the tower served someone's purpose, a symbol of authority, of fear, of historical pride, and to challenge it would be to challenge those who benefit from its shadow. A tower is rarely just stone. It is memory made manifest, a structure that survives generations. A church steeple or a minaret tells the story of a community's faith. A prison tower tells of authority, control, and the gaze of the unseen watcher. A war tower, an old fortress or stronghold, speaks of blood and survival. Towers are built high for a reason: to watch, to warn, and to dominate. They stand where others can see them, long after the builders are gone. So when we read, "No one came to take the tower down," we are also reading about how societies hold on to their past. We cling to old monuments because they remind us of who we were, or at least who we think we were. The tower might be irrelevant in function, but it is alive in meaning. To take it down would be to erase part of the collective identity, even if that identity is painful or contested. And so we don't take it down. We don't question why it's there. We grow up with it on the horizon, a quiet sentinel of memory, and assume it belongs. But the line also speaks to human passivity. Why does no one act? Because acting takes energy. Because acting means confronting not only the tower, but also what it represents. The second sentence, "Why would they?" is laced with the bitter truth of how people become resigned to things they believe they cannot change. There's an old saying, if you live long enough with the walls of your prison, they become part of your home. The tower, then, may represent any oppressive system, political, social, or emotional, that endures not because people love it, but because they've stopped believing in the possibility of its removal. It's easier to look away than to confront. This is where the sentence takes on a tragic depth. It doesn't just describe neglect. It describes the quiet complicity of doing nothing. But maybe the tower isn't a literal building at all. Maybe it's a metaphor for something much more intimate. Towers are isolating. They are lonely. They are walls that separate us from one another. To some, the tower might be a personal trauma, a memory or grief that stands tall inside them, untouched, unchallenged, because dismantling it would be too painful. For others, it could be a legacy of guilt, shame, or unspoken words passed down like inheritance. No one comes to take those towers down either. And why would they? Painful towers are easier left standing than faced with trembling hands and dismantled brick by brick. In this sense, the statement becomes almost elegiac. It speaks to the human tendency to keep our inner fortresses intact, to live with our scars rather than attempt the messy work of healing. Consider how often towers outlast the people who built them. The towers of medieval castles in Europe still rise over landscapes where the battles they were built for are long forgotten. The watchtowers of the Great Wall of China remain even though the armies that manned them dissolved centuries ago. These towers stand not because they are needed, but because no one has come to erase them. In post-war cities, towers, damaged, burned, hollow, are left standing as memorials. Sometimes they are preserved as warnings. Other times they are ignored, falling into decay because tearing them down would require money, willpower, or the courage to let go of the past. Thus, the line could be read as a commentary on history. Our world is full of towers that no one has come to take down because we are afraid to face what their absence would mean. There is an ethical edge here too. The question, "Why would they?" challenges us to consider responsibility. Should someone have taken the tower down? If yes, why didn't they? And if not, what does that say about us? Maybe the tower is oppressive, a structure of tyranny. Maybe it is outdated, dangerous, and crumbling. Maybe its very existence is an insult to the present. If that is the case, then the failure to dismantle it reflects moral cowardice. But perhaps the tower is a relic of beauty, a ruin with a soul, and the failure to remove it shows a different kind of humanity, a reverence for what once was. Ultimately, the second sentence closes the door on the debate. Why would they? Is not a question seeking answers. It is an assertion that no one ever intended to act. It drips with inevitability. It suggests that the tower was never coming down because it serves some unspoken purpose, if only to remind everyone of its existence. And perhaps that's the truth about towers, whether built of stone or of memory. We leave them standing because they do something for us, even when they hurt. No one came to take the tower down. Why would they? In these two short sentences lies an entire story of apathy, history, trauma, and human nature. Towers, whether real or symbolic, are the things we allow to remain because it's easier than the act of dismantling them. We live in their shadow, pass them every day, and tell ourselves they are harmless, or worse, that they are necessary. We pretend they are part of the scenery until one day we forget they were ever built by human hands at all. And so the tower stays. Not because it must, not because it should, but because no one came to take it down. Why would they? The line, and though it had nothing left to look for, it still faced the sea, is a deeply evocative sentence that speaks volumes through its brevity. It gives us an image, an action, and an attitude, something that has exhausted its quest, its journey, and its purpose for searching, yet remains in position, oriented toward the vastness of the sea. To unpack this fully, one has to explore the layers of metaphor, psychology, and existential implication embedded within such a line. This is not just a description of a simple physical act. It is an exploration of persistence, of facing the unknown, of continuing to engage with life even when purpose seems to have dissolved. In its economy of words, this sentence captures the human condition, our relationship with longing, and the strange compulsion to stay facing the horizon even when we believe nothing more awaits us there. First, we can start with the imagery. The sea has always been a symbol of enormity, mystery, and unending possibility. It is both beautiful and terrifying, a boundless expanse that has historically represented everything from freedom and exploration to oblivion and death. To face the sea is to face the unknown, to confront something larger than oneself, something that dwarfs individual existence. And yet the phrase is not just about looking at the sea. It is about maintaining that orientation, facing it, even when it had nothing left to look for. This means that whatever it represents, whether it is a person, an object, or an idea, has reached a point where there is no longer an active quest. The search has ended. There is no treasure to be found, no lover to return, and no ship to appear on the horizon. And yet, the stance toward the sea remains. This is persistence without reason, posture without purpose, a stillness that paradoxically suggests a deep inner motion, the kind of movement that has nothing to do with searching, but everything to do with being. This line could be read as a commentary on grief. When we experience profound loss, when something or someone we loved has vanished irretrievably, we often find ourselves lingering in the spaces that once gave us meaning, even though those spaces no longer contain what we seek. Imagine an old lighthouse keeper who still turns his gaze toward the water each evening, even though no ships come anymore. Or think of a widow who walks to the shoreline where she once met her beloved, knowing he will not return. The act of facing the sea, despite having nothing left to look for, can be seen as an act of mourning. It's a refusal to turn away from what once gave life its vitality, even when it no longer provides it. In this sense, the line captures a kind of sacred futility. There is nothing to gain, nothing to retrieve, yet one remains faithfully turned toward what once held everything. But it can also be interpreted as an act of acceptance. To face the sea after the search has ended might be to accept the vastness of life, to stop demanding it deliver meaning and instead simply acknowledge it as it is. When you no longer look for anything, when you've surrendered your quest for answers or for closure, what remains? You, standing before the sea, no longer driven by hunger, no longer aching with expectation, you simply exist in front of immensity. This can be a profound spiritual state, the end of striving. Many philosophical and mystical traditions speak of this kind of turning point, when the seeker stops seeking, when the pilgrim understands that the journey is not about the destination, and when the act of being in the presence of the infinite becomes the only purpose. In this way, the line points to a deep kind of peace, a letting go of the insatiable need to extract meaning from everything. The sea no longer needs to provide answers. It no longer needs to give back what was lost. It just needs to be seen. And it, the subject of the sentence, only needs to face it. At the same time, there is a quiet heroism in this line. Facing the sea is not a passive act. It can be interpreted as an act of courage, standing before something immense, mysterious, and potentially indifferent, without expectation of reward. In this way, the line resonates with existentialist thought. Think of Albert Camus' idea of the absurd, that we live in a universe that offers no inherent meaning, yet we still wake each day and choose to live. It had nothing left to look for. In existential terms, means the search for cosmic answers has ended in silence. And yet, like Camus's Sisyphus pushing his boulder, the subject of this line still faces the sea. This is defiance. This is resilience. It is the choice to engage with existence even when it refuses to give us what we want. And so, facing the sea becomes a quiet declaration. I will remain here, unflinching, even if I gain nothing. Consider also the narrative possibility embedded in this line. It sounds like the closing sentence of a story, the final image of a character who has been through everything and come to rest at last. We do not know what it refers to, and that ambiguity makes the sentence haunting. Is it a person, an animal, an abandoned lighthouse, a weathered statue, a derelict shipwreck? Each reading gives the line a different flavor. If it is a person, perhaps this is a soul who has spent a lifetime chasing dreams or running from pain, who now, finally emptied of the need for more, still turns toward the horizon out of instinct, out of reverence, or out of habit. If it is an object, say a lighthouse, the line gains a sense of tragic dignity. Even when no ships come, the lighthouse still faces the sea, holding to its purpose even when the world no longer needs it. The absence of a clear subject turns this line into a universal parable. It could apply to anyone or anything that has endured and now simply remains. Another layer to consider is the relationship between looking and facing. To look for something implies an active search, scanning, hoping, anticipating. To face something, however, implies steadiness. Facing the sea is not about finding anything within it. It is about being oriented toward it, acknowledging it, and meeting it. In this way, the sentence describes a movement away from striving toward presence. When you face the sea without looking for anything, you are not projecting your needs or desires onto it. You are simply with it. There's a deep lesson in this about relationships, spirituality, and even art. Sometimes the most profound encounters come not from trying to extract meaning, but from simply allowing yourself to be with what is, as it is. The line also carries a sense of time, and though it had nothing left to look for, implies that there was once something to look for, some reason, some purpose, some object of desire. The quest is now over. Whether it ended in failure, fulfillment, or loss, we cannot know. But the very structure of the sentence tells us that whatever happened, it did not lead to turning away. The facing remains. And perhaps this is one of the deepest truths about grief, healing, or endurance. You may lose what you were searching for, but you can still stay oriented toward what matters. You can still face the vastness. You can still live. Finally, there is beauty in the way this line does not resolve. It does not tell us what happens next. It does not tell us why the subject still faces the sea. It leaves us with the image alone, a figure, animate or inanimate, with no purpose, no quest, no hope of reward, still oriented toward the endless horizon. And maybe that is the point. Maybe it tells us something essential about life, that even when the journey seems to have ended, there is still value in facing the infinite, in refusing to turn our backs on what is greater than us. It's a kind of wordless faith, not in answers, but in being. In sum, and though it had nothing left to look for, it still faced the sea, is a meditation on perseverance, grief, acceptance, and existential dignity. It describes the posture we take when we have exhausted all reasons yet refuse to look away. It is a line that could belong to the ending of a novel, the final stanza of a poem, or the quiet closing shot of a film. It captures that moment when seeking ends, but being continues. It shows us that even when there is nothing left to find, there is something profound about continuing to face the immensity of life, of mystery, of the sea.